Freedman News stream. If you click that, it'll take you to the live stream so you can see what I'm seeing. Um, but yeah, so this is their website, right? So the main thing, they're calling it the Public Safety Training Center, which is some, you know, marketing propaganda. What's up, A Boogie? What up, Swanee? We're going over the Cop City controversy today and looking under the hood at the details. So if you pull up the stream, you can follow along. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll just scroll through the website so I can show y'all kind of like what the propaganda that the Atlanta Police Foundation is putting out about it. And then we're going to watch the little mock-up video of the city and get into the details of how much it costs, who's funding it, um, the protests and things like that. Okay, so here's what they say. The new Atlantic Public Safety Training Center, you know, what's known as Cop City, you know, they're not calling it that, right? Will reimagine law enforcement training and police fire rescue community engagement. The PSTC will improve morale, retention, recruitment, and training for APD, Atlanta Police Department, and AFR, Atlanta Fire and Rescue professionals, and ensure that Atlanta attracts and motivates those most highly committed to careers in law enforcement. Set a national standard for community engagement, neighborhood sensitivity, and devotion to civil rights of all citizens by law enforcement. Okay, that's questionable, right? Embrace police reform and cultural sensitivity through extensive training and educational partnership with the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Again, questionable. Facilitate collaboration and joint training between Atlanta's police, fire rescue agencies, and their local, state, and federal partner agencies. Welcome the community to its public spaces. The public safety training will afford APD and AFR, the South's largest law enforcement agencies, a state-of-the-art training facility, reduced insurance and operational training costs, and the essential training flexibility required of best-in-class urban police departments. So this is the map of the facility, right? This is 85 acres, right, that they're given to for $10 a year. 85 acres for $10 a year, which is, when I was looking at the math, like 11 cents per acre, or something like that. It's ridiculous. So here's what they plan to have. All these different buildings. And then I'm going to show y'all the video because the video kind of gives an overview. It's like a mock-up of what they plan to have in it. So let me go to the video now. So here's their APD has 6 subscribers on YouTube and 4 likes on this video, and it's 3 years old, right? That's kind of crazy if you really think about it. How many views does this video have? 4.3K views. Okay, so here's the video. Oh, there's one part where they mentioned 48. Here's the mock. So if they have a 40-acre horse pasture and they're paying $10 for 85 acres a year, right? That's about $4.40 for 40 acres. Can you believe that? And this is for horses, and we still don't have our 40 acres. So I was looking in, doing some research into like who's funding this. Here's a good video overview of like who are all the backers. It's kind of like the big companies in Atlanta. So here's an investigation by the local news station.
Stop plan to build this massive training facility, but who supports it and who's going to pick up the tab?
Our investigative team is following the money tonight to get you answers. Faith Jesse joining us now. Faith, what did you find out here?
Well, guys, according to property records, the city of Atlanta now owns the sprawling DeKalb County location, but taxpayers are only expected to foot about 1/3 of the estimated $90 million price tag. That means the nonprofit Atlanta.
So out of the 90 million that's going to pay for the actual, not the land, but for the actual construction, out of that 90 million, 30 million is coming from the Atlanta taxpayers and 60 million is coming from private companies.
Atlanta Police Foundation is working to raise millions for construction. So here's the question: where do they get the funding? The organization says private sector companies fund its project. And we got the tax filings, which shows 80% of the money comes from private donations. Its board filled with executives from nearly all of Atlanta's big name companies. Let's take a look at.
So here's the companies on that are funding this: UPS, McKesson, Waffle House, Carter, Inspire, KPMG, the Coca-Cola Company, Delta, Accenture, Brands, Georgia Power, Home Depot, Cushman and Wakefield, Equifax, Wells Fargo, Georgia Pacific, Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and EY. And there's a few more companies. Let me pull up that one. Chick-fil-A was another one that was mentioned that's not in this one. Let me pull that up. But the crazy part is the number of corporations that are involved in funding. So let me pull up the other number of companies really quickly. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. So the other companies are Chick-fil-A. Well, I guess Chick-fil-A is actually the only one that's not mentioned. But out of all of the companies, these are the companies that fund the Atlanta Police Foundation. And the Atlanta Police Foundation is funding Cop City. So the city is selling these 85, I guess leasing these 85 acres for $10 a year. And then they're spending $90 million on construction for the facility. And like I said, 30 million is coming from Atlanta taxpayers, 60 million is coming from these private companies. Chick-fil-A, UPS, Waffle House, blah, 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 Wells Fargo, Home Depot, Coca-Cola, Delta. These are like, if not Fortune 500 companies, like usually billion-dollar companies. And so all of this came after the 2020 protests. And if you think about the history, you had Breonna Taylor, that was Atlanta, and then you had Rayshard Brooks, who was the one in the parking lot of the Wendy's who was killed, right? So two kind of, and they burned down that Wendy's. So you can imagine, companies like Chick-fil-A is like, oh, well, we don't, and Waffle House, oh, we don't want our buildings to get burnt down because we're not actually doing anything to protect Black lives, right? Like, this is kind of like their insurance policy to fund repression instead of funding things like reparations, right? Um, and so, what else I want to show you? There's this one video by I think it's AJ. They did a pretty good overview. I'm going to show a few excerpts from that really quickly before we get into the rest of this. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is the part where they talk about the funding. Let me show you that.
Considered one of the most powerful police foundations in the country. For instance, when
control over the police, in this case, the police have control over the city.
So why did council members approve this facility? It's important to understand the Police Foundation in Atlanta. It's considered one of the most powerful police foundations in the country. For instance, when the mayor was elected, the CEO of the foundation served on his transition committee. Among those sitting on its board are leaders of corporations like UPS, Wells Fargo, Chick-fil-A, Home Depot, and Delta Airlines. The APF raises investments to finance police projects like Cop City. Of the $90 million needed to build the facility, $60 million will be funded by the foundation's corporate donors. The remaining $30 million will likely be paid by taxpayers. Well before the council voted on the facility, the Police Foundation had been lobbying council members. And the cost? The city leased the land to the foundation for just $10 per year for the next 50 years.
50 years. So think about it. $10 times 50 years is $500. Again, 85 acres for $10 a year is like 11 cents per acre. And as I mentioned, the 40-acre horse pasture is about $4.40. Sorry. So it's kind of crazy and a slap in the face if you really think about it in terms of we haven't even got our 40 acres and they're building 40-acre horse pastures for $4.40.
Two of the council members who approved the plan agreed to sit down for an interview.
Why did you vote to approve this facility?
It's going to be a big recruiting tool. We have a duty, I think, and an obligation to provide our employees with the best in class of everything.
But you also...
So the other thing I want to show you that I was looking at doing this research, they said it was owned. It was like it used to be a prison, and like the land that it stands on used to be like a old prison, and obviously held a lot of Black people. The population around Atlanta and Cop City is around 75% Black. In some places, 90% Black. Excuse me. And then what are other 3 acres? Let's see. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the context of genocide. So on our website, we have our policy page where we break down, our Freedmen agenda of reparations now, Freedmen reconstruction, and genocide prevention. And so on the genocide prevention side, we're looking at the United Nations and U.S. definitions of genocide. And if you think about what Cop City will enable, and you look at the statistics of what happens today with the number of cops that exist, there's a correlation between, the number of cops and the number of incidents of harm and things like that. So let's look at the definitions of genocide that are relevant to what the development of a cop city would do. So lynchings and massacres, killing members of the group. We all know about police brutality and hate crimes. Physical and mental harm, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. So a lot of that is in the context of mass incarceration, as well as arrest and false arrests, false imprisonments, false detainment, all these things. And then you have apartheid, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. extermination, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and then family separation, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So I'm going to go through the statistics and kind of point out which ones will be most relevant to Cop City in terms of how it could affect Freeman. So the first one under lynchings and massacres would be extrajudicial killings or extrajudicial executions, right? Basically, police killings, police brutality. Black men are 4 times more likely than any other race to be killed by the police, and black women are like twice as likely to be killed by the police than any others. And if you look at the statistics from the Washington Post that they put out, looking at data about police killings from like 20 up to like I think it was like 2016 at the time. You look at it and you see out of like 1,550 police killings, 1,500 were of black men and 50 were of black women, right? So that's kind of the scale that we have to think about. And each of these acts of genocide targets each of us differently. So the lynchings and massacres and the physical and mental harm generally affect black men, while apartheid affects black men and women, and then extermination usually affects black women, and then family separation usually affects black children, right? So physical and mental harm. So when we look at the mass incarceration rate, freedmen, we're about 11.8% of the U.S. population, but we represent about 20+% of those in prison or in jail. And so that's just ridiculous, like twice as many, twice as overrepresented in terms of population. And then sentencing disparities, we're sentenced usually twice as amount of time than white people for the same crime. And then you look at wrongful convictions. In terms of exonerations, we represent 50% of the people who are exonerated, even though we're about 11.8% of the U.S. population. Right. So when you think about, again, Cop City in terms of the first two, lynchings and massacres and physical and mental harm, you can imagine increases in extrajudicial executions, mainly of black men, but also including black women. And then you'll see more incarceration of primarily black men, and also obviously of black women as well. And then when it comes to their sentencing, they'll usually be sentenced for twice as amount of the time that someone who's white who committed the same crime. And then in the context of the exonerations, people will be locked up and lose their homes, lose their leases, lose their family, lose their jobs, lose all types of opportunities when they represent 50% of those that are exonerated and come out having not actually been duly convicted of a crime, right? But actually wrongfully convicted, right? And so, that is going to harm us most. And then when you look at apartheid in terms of food, water, education, finance, housing, healthcare, employment, land, connectivity, and disenfranchisement, this is where when we get the short of the end of the stick, we're usually funneled into the mass incarceration system, and all of these things in terms of depriving us of the necessary resources that we need to survive, cause problems where we don't have water, we don't have enough food, we don't have the level of schoolings where we have the right books, we have the best teachers, the best facilities, so that you can imagine that even being affected. The one that will probably be least affected potentially is extermination, which is usually done behind the scenes in hospitals. So maternal mortality, the hysterectomy rate, the abortion rate and infant mortality, that usually happens in the hospital behind closed doors. You don't have usually these things on camera filmed and put on the newsreel like you do with the killing of primarily black men by police. And then family separation, you can imagine an effect where this city will be used to train them, because usually the first point of contact for most people when it comes to family separation is child protective services. So in 2008, compared to white children, similarly situated black children were 77% more likely to be removed from their homes. So you can imagine this being affected, for example, which would also increase the number of kids primarily in the foster care system. Even though we're 14% of the population, we're 23% of those that are in foster care. And ironically, you would think an increase of, people who are supposed to be peace officers would help with missing persons, since freedmen are the most missing. But we know now that with the way the system works, that we're the least, even though we're the most missing, we don't get the number of Amber Alerts in proportion to the degree that we're missing. And we also don't get the level of media attention or resources in these different departments to pursue missing person cases. And so that could be kidnapping, that could be trafficking, all types of things. And if you look at the statistics, under 18 is the highest part. So if you look at for us, in terms of like missing persons, mainly be people who are under 18. Adults only represent about like 25%, whereas under 18 is like 75%. So these are all acts of genocide. So you can imagine, unfortunately, if Cop City isn't stopped, that these acts of genocide will increase in the Atlanta area, which will primarily affect people who are freedmen. And so, it's something I definitely want to bring awareness to as I look more into it and looked at the research. There's this Intercept article, which I haven't got a chance to fully read through yet, but it basically talks about Cop City going national. And, the idea is basically that it's going to be a kind of an example for other cities to follow suit, right? They usually test things out and they usually replicate it around the United States once they figure out a formula that works for them, right? So has anybody looked at Cop City or gotten a chance to look at the research or anything, or any media?
I haven't had the opportunity to look at anything, but I did just read an article about them trying to do the same thing in Chicago. So, like you said, seems like they're probably going to go nationwide. So something like this probably like only in the major cities. So, I mean, look for your next slave catch university coming from a city near you. Yeah, I don't really know. Like, it seems like the corporations are all for protecting their profits, but not protecting the people. So, I mean, and I don't even know, like, do cops really protect people, or are they just overseas? So, I mean, there's a lot to get into with in regards to police. So, no, man, it's just crazy the amount of money that they put into police officers. So it's just amazing.
Right. And I mean, 85 acres for $10 a year. I mean, who wouldn't buy that? You know what I mean? Shit, I got $10. I'll buy right now for 85 acres a year, right? And so to think that, they're just giving this land away for that little, there has to be malfeasance. You know what I mean? Like that's shady dealing when a city is willing to lease its land for that little, right? If this is so important, you should be able to not only demand a higher price, but they're making it so easy. It's like they're giving it away for free, basically. Like, here, just build it, okay? Like, if you can't come up with $10, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? So I got 85 acres for you. All you gotta do is find $10. You know what I mean? 99.999% of everybody in this country would agree to that deal. There's probably someone who would probably be like, no, I don't want that. It's probably a trick. But you know, everybody else would understand that's a deal that anybody would take, right? So yeah, here's what the Mock City is supposed to be looking like. They're posting basically the one thing. Like I studied a lot of engineering and things like robotics, and one of the things I looked into when I was in college was there was these DARPA challenges that had come to build autonomous cars, right? And DARPA, which is part of the Defense Department, basically the DoD's Advanced Research Projects Agency, they fund projects like the Grand Challenge. They did one that was like to have an autonomous car go across a desert. And then the next that they did was the Urban Challenge, where they tried to build a artificial city to have a kind of competition, to have a bunch of like people at different colleges and research institutions like build their own autonomous car and traverse this city, right? So this is the first thing that popped in my head. And then when companies like Uber started like acquiring like some of these companies that came out of that challenge, they ended up building their own replica cities where they started training their autonomous cars. And so, you know, when I saw this, it made me think, well, they're building the same thing for the same type of training, not necessarily for autonomous cars, but they're going to be testing all these things in the city that they think there's problems with, right? But they're going to use it in a more kind of like violent way. Like it's all going to be like opposition tactics. You know, I don't imagine much of the Mock City going to be used for trying to resolve things peacefully, right? It'll be mainly like, you know, munition training and things like that, right? And that's kind of probably going to be the main problem if this thing gets constructed, because what comes out of a place that's sterilized doesn't have real conflicts, or if you think about the type of conflicts that will be staged or acted out, they're going to be crafted by people that don't have any real concept of what goes on in Atlanta, especially among the freedmen population, right? So they'll be creating like these, you know, false realities that then they're training these officers for, that then they'll start to practice in the real world, right? And you know, when I was doing Pop Warner, they talked a lot about, you know, practice and like, you know, what you do in practice is what you're going to do in the game, right? And so what they're going to be doing in this Mock City and what they're going to be training is what they're going to be doing in the real world. And when their construction of the city and their trainings that they perform in this Mock City don't actually correspond to realities or address the glaring problems of genocide, of extrajudicial executions and mass incarceration and wrongful convictions and things like that, then they're going to be training for the wrong things, right? Because they're not going to be training to reduce these statistics, right? They're not going to be training to reduce the number of extrajudicial executions. They're not going to be training to reduce the number of people who are mass incarcerated or reduce the number of people who are wrongfully convicted and then later exonerated, right? They're going to be training for things like arrests and things like detentions and ability for like crowd control and things like that. Like a completely different set of tactics and skills. And so that's one thing to point out. California, did you want to say something? Let me invite some more people up on the stage. You there, California Mischievous? All right, we'll come back. But yeah, so I was just looking at this. There was this one Democracy Now! Video. A lot of it's biased, but there was a good part by like the bias parts, for example, they have a lot of the Antifa type people, and they're all talking about saving the forest. None of it is about saving our lives. They're like, save the forest. We don't want the forest to be destroyed. What? So it's kind of like they're coming at it from a completely different view, right? They're like environmentalists compared to like actual people who want to prevent the killing of freedmen and things like that. Okay, not this one. Let's see. Give me 1 second. How you doing, Alexis? Sent you out a mic if you want to come up. Okay, here's this video that I was gonna show you. Oh no, it was a Democracy Now! Video. It's this guy, Camus something. Okay, here we go. But this is how he talks about what's going to happen, and like, I think he has an organization called Community Builders Movement. Okay. So basically, all these different organizations, like the Georgia has its own similar organization to the FBI called the GBI. Just like the GBI, the FBI, and the Atlanta police are all working together on the Cop City plan. And then here's this FAQ that the Atlanta Police Foundation put out, and here's the crazy part. They were basically trying to get 380 acres, right? So they're like, did you always envision 85 acres? They're like, well, we actually kind of wanted 380 acres. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, any other thoughts about this stuff? I know this is probably new to some people and not everybody's in Atlanta, so kind of just want to share what I was learning. California, go for it. You got your hand up. Oh, you sound far away, or like you got headphones on or something. Not really. I mean, they're getting it for $10, so despite like, why not take it? But mainly, they're going to be using it to construct all these different facilities. Like when you go through their website, on their website and on their video that they made, they're going to have a leadership building, classrooms, nature trail, a pavilion, a horse barn, pasture, kennel, controlled access shooting range, training fire station, Class A burn building, future fire safety facilities, mock village, vehicle skills pad, skid pad, EVOC, I don't know what that is, EVOC storage, future building, storm water detention, future public parkland, public parking at trailhead, existing buildings, to Michelle Obama Park, 100+ landscape buffer, key road improvements, future E911 building, emergency 911 building, I guess. And then in the video, they basically kind of give an overview of all the different structures. The main focus will be the Mock City. I mean, they're freaking having a 40-acre horse pasture, which is damn near 50% of the land of the 85 acres, right? So most of it will sit on like 45 acres, while they'll have this pasture of 40 acres of land on the total 85. So they're gonna have all these different facilities. If you can see my screen. Yeah, a rec center, but they're gonna have, like, it's almost the best explanation that someone gave that I heard was, think of it as like a base, like a militarized police base. That was kind of like the best description I can imagine it as, where they have like, you know, their own way of basically doing large scale training, um, and things like that. And so, um, yeah, I think a rec center sounds a little too kind. It's like, so from what I understand, this 85 acres of this like historic land that was used to be a farm. In their FAQ, they kind of talk about a prison farm rather. Um, and so it's like the city owns this land and they're kind of selling it to the Atlanta Police Foundation for $10 a year for 85 acres. So it's kind of crazy. I mean, that's kind of the sketchy part. I mean, the city sets the price because of their land, right? So it's kind of them giving it away for nothing, which makes you think that the money involved is going to be, there's probably like, people getting paid under the table type stuff, you know? Yeah, $10 for 85 acres is 11 cents per acre. And then for like the, huh? For 50 years, exactly. That's $500. So they can pay the $500 now. You know what I mean? It's like, come on. Um, yeah. So basically, they're getting the 10 acres for, or sorry, they're getting the 85 acres for $10 a year for 50 years, $500 total, and then on top of that, so they can just, throw that away right now, just pay the 500. But then on top of that, the 90 million, they're raising 30 million from the taxpayers and 60 million from these corporations that we talked about earlier, and they're gonna fund the large bulk, the corporations like UPS, Waffle House, Wells Fargo, Equifax, EY, Delta, Coca-Cola, Georgia Power, Georgia Pacific, etc. So I guess what I understand is, in terms of the genocide, they're going to mainly be affecting us, right? It's going to be us that are going to be locked up more and, you know, extrajudicially killed. All these things will probably increase because they're not decreasing with the number of police. Like, the number of police over time has increased, and these statistics haven't decreased. You said who's connected to this? Yeah, that's kind of like the police foundation, Atlanta Police Foundation. That's kind of their, like, I guess, local lobbying group slash. I don't know if it's their union as well, but that's kind of like the big player in town. Um, they're the ones that are going to have the 30 million and the 60 million, 90 million total from uh, the money they're raising for Cop City. So they're really the people who are controlling the strings. Yeah, it's crazy. How about you, Alexis? What are your thoughts about all this stuff?
I think it's absolutely insane and deplorable. I was with my dad. I don't remember. I'm trying to think if it was a Thursday or Monday. He was taking a body to a crematorium, and I rode with him. it's for a funeral home, like, calm down, dude. It's like, but it's gonna be cremated, you're gonna take the crematorium. Anyway, I was talking with my dad, we were listening to Sirius XM, and I think it was Clay Kane was on, and he was talking about it, so I didn't know a whole lot. So I came out and did a little research, and I was in a space this week where someone was talking about it. It was kind of crazy. I think they took some land that belonged to some other group or something. And then I know that the Israeli National Police are involved in the training there. But a lot of police departments use the Israeli National Police to do training for them, like all over the country. And that's not anything. It's something that I learned that was new, but apparently it's not a new thing because it happens all over the country. But yeah, it's absolutely insane. And I do think it's going to be something that's very detrimental. I know it's been protested a lot. Are they still protesting it now? I haven't really followed it a lot because I'm not in Atlanta. But yeah, I don't like it at all. It doesn't sound like it's going to do anything good for us.
Right. Yeah, I started I watched like a 15-minute press conference that I guess was earlier today by the Atlanta DA. And she was basically giving an update on on what happened. She basically, it was interesting. She was basically saying, so there was like a protester that was shot in the forest and killed, and the police were saying after he shot first, so they returned fire and killed him. But there's no body cam footage or anything like that. But the point is, she's saying that she's recusing herself as the DA from being a part of that investigation. And then when further pressed about it, she said that based on a new law that was enacted recently, instead of her being replaced with the Attorney General of the state, there's going to be this council, and they're going to elect who's going to replace her basically for the case. I thought that was kind of weird, and it her answer to it was that she was doing it to make it not seem like there would be a bias in the case. And she was saying one last thing. She was saying it would only be for the killing of the person. The other, I guess, 7 people who were arrested on domestic terrorism charges in the forest, they're not going to have her case separated from her. She's still going to be on those cases. She's just recusing herself from the case from the dude who got killed, shot and killed. But yeah, Alexa, what were you going to say, son?
I was just going to say, it is interesting, I guess, that you're saying that the cops killed one of the protesters, and that's the one she's recusing, so she doesn't have to charge the cops. That's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so of course she's going to recuse herself in that situation. Let's remember the district attorney is the top cop. Mm-hmm. It's the number one cop, and we need to use that to our advantage when we can, and always should. I would love for more of us to go into prosecution, to do rank and file jobs, and become DAs as well.
Yeah, and those are elected positions, and a lot of people don't know that.
Well, they are elected, and there's a lot of power that goes with it, even when you're in the rank and file yourself, which more of us friends. I'm not surprised that she recused herself, but she doesn't have to charge cops. That's not, something I'm completely surprised by. Maybe just outside council will do what they need to do to figure it out. I'm imagining most of these protesters have been white people that are charged and were killed, I think, right?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. No, it's actually interesting because when I started seeing the media attention, it's mainly white people, especially the people in the forest. And there's 2 ideological strands to this. The people in the community that are black, they're more concerned about the cop city and the effects it'll have on them. A lot of the white people, a lot of their protesting, a lot of their propaganda and their arguments are about protecting the forest because it's sacred land. Yeah, they're talking about like as an environmentalist and sacred land issue. They're not concerned as much. They're saying like they'll use Stop Cop City, but it's for the purpose of stopping the destruction of an 85-acre forest as opposed to what the effect of that destruction and construction of a cop city will have on people like us.
And you're absolutely right, because when I was hearing, it's like, this sounds like a big land thing, so it's like they took some land from something up in the park, I don't know anything. I do want to say this, though, you have to go back, because Cop City did this spring up yesterday, right? It had to be planned, there were city council meetings about it, the mayor is signing off, the district attorney.
Oh yeah, apparently like 70% of people who went to those council meetings didn't like it, basically.
Yeah. And so these are things that we just have to be very, very, aware of, things that are happening all the way around. And members' pockets were lined to make it happen all along the way. They got there. I think it's going to be absolutely terrible. But again, I'm not there, so I couldn't go out there and protest it and all that and know what was happening. But this is important why we make sure we're represented at every level of government. And even when we're not on the city councils or the county commissions, things of that nature, that we still go to the meetings when we can. I know it's a lot to ask when we have to work and get families and all that stuff. Just as much as we can, be aware and apply pressure to all those people that are elected to represent us so that we don't have to get here. It's when I was an undergrad, I remember one of our professors talking to us about, NIMBY. You guys may have heard of it, the whole not in my backyard type of a thing. It's a white people's organization. And there's one that comes along called WIMBY, Why in My Backyard. And that was the organization that was founded people like us. So to be as proactive as we can be is really, really important. And I do want to stay with you, Freedmen Party, and hi, Boogie, how you doing? Hello to the room. There's a space I wanted to go to the News Cutter Association here in a moment with the candidates to do Q&A. So I wanted to catch that. But a great topic.
Totally. We try to hold our spaces to like at least 30 minutes to an hour. So don't even trip. We're about to wrap up shortly. So thank you for coming through. Really appreciate it. Also, we need to catch up and talk about ballot access strategies. So
I'm home all week, so just hit me up.
Okay, for sure.
All right, cool.
Yep. Any last thoughts in the room before we shut down for tomorrow?
No, I got nothing. Freedom Party.
No worries. Well, while we're in here, y'all, check out the Freedmen News Network, subscribe, and then also check out our Freedmen Party website. Join, become part of the party, and then if you're interested, we can talk about leadership opportunities. What up, Swanee?
What's going on, my brother? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, peace, love, and reparations to my Freedmen brothers and sisters out in the room. It's been a while, man. I've been busy with work, man, but I just want to get on here, man, just to say I appreciate you dropping some information. That's what it's about. And the more we continue to try to educate ourselves on what's going on around the country, the better it is for all of us collectively. And that's why it's so important for us to have these spaces and conversations, even on Twitter, outside of Twitter, don't matter where it is. As long as we're having a conversation about how we as a people, freedmen, need to get what we are deserved and owed. But just the Cop City situation, I'm a part of the organization of a union. I'm a president of my local union. But down in North Carolina, they have a situation going on right now where in certain neighborhoods, they have certain members of the white community who have target ranges right next to the churches in some people's houses. And they have target ranges, they have grenades, they're throwing in the fields. So they're doing this all over the country. And it's a real big problem. So we need to make ourselves aware of this, what's going on, and stay on top of it. So I appreciate you just bringing it up in conversation for sure. Yeah,
thank you. I'm not in Atlanta either, but I got family in Atlanta. A lot of my people on my mom's side are in Atlanta, and so when I looked at this, it was kind of remote, but I was like, you know what, I got to look more into this and make sure people are aware of what's going on, because even though we may not be directly affected, people who are freedmen are affected in that area. And then again, it spreads like a virus throughout the country and people replicate it. So you can imagine a cop city coming near a city near you, you know what I mean? And that's what we got to worry about as well. Let's go to Grizz and then California.
Yo, what's up? Can you hear me well?
Yep, I can hear you perfectly.
Hey, man, I need my Freedman family on this one. I'm in Mississippi, and I heard y'all talk about this guy before. His name is Ty Pinkins. He's running for U.S. Senator down here in Mississippi, and he's agreed to talk to me. So, I really reaching out for, to help with a line of questioning that I can ask him. And eventually, I'd like to bring him to the platform. And he's previously worked the Obama administration as well as the Trump administration. I know a lot of y'all are probably familiar with the black farmers who was displaced by the white South African immigrants down here. Boy, he's the lawyer that worked that case and won that case for them and got them their settlement.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely interested. We could talk in the back channel, but what we could definitely do if you're interested is, since you already working on that connection, we can use the Freedman News Network and we could do an interview and you could help run it. And, you know, if you need help with questions, I could work with you on coming up with questions.
Right. So, yeah, definitely. I'll hit you in the back channel, brother.
Sounds like a plan, man. California, go for it. Oh, you sound far away again. Yeah, well, she didn't have to. She decided to recuse herself, and it's kind of funny. She did it in third person. She was like, you know, the DA is recusing herself from the. It's like you are the DA, but she was trying to make it seem like, I guess, almost like it wasn't. I don't know, like she was kind of just distancing herself from the whole thing. Just put it that way, and. I can't hear you anymore. Can you speak up a little bit louder? DA Jackie Lakes. Oh yeah. Good job though. What's crazy is like BLM has so much momentum and they blew it away by like just all lives mattering the whole thing and not really using the money to help the people. They kind of just bought mansions and dumb stuff. Well, again, Black Lives Matter LA. Right. Damn. Oh wow. Right. 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 Yeah, nah. Protests gotta be real. You gotta know who are the key stakeholders, so to speak, that you need to protest against. And the other thing is to think about the politics. Like protesting is good when you either are not protesting against someone who's not in an elected position, like there's people who are working for the government that haven't been elected, right? And so that's kind of like one thing. The other thing is in terms of like certain policies that elected officials do. And then you got to decide what's the best way to change the policy, either to remove people, change policy, protest, things like that. So there's a multifaceted approach in terms of strategy. Yeah, consistency. Well, you got to do both. Voting is key. I know, yeah, that's another thing Black Lives Matter messed up. They had so many people, but they didn't focus on voting, which is kind of key. Like, if Black Lives Matter took its all the people it had as followers and turned them into voters for issues like reparations, we'd have it by now. But instead, they just kind of continue to grift. Yeah, PACs are super important. Good, yeah, PACs are key. Right. Good. Yeah. Well, one of the things we talk about at the party is the importance of super PACs and PACs. Like, if you think about the Democrats and the Republicans, they have multiple super PACs and PACs that fund them and their candidates for the party, and that's what we need. We need multiple super PACs. So we're working on the Freedman Super PAC. We're working on creating that. But in the meantime, there's things like the Blood PAC. Um, the pack that you just mentioned is an example of, like, trying to do progressive work. It's important that we channel these to not only do work, but also do the work to change the politicians on the chessboard, so to speak. Um, but yeah, I do want to wrap up soon. Any last thought from my co-host, A Boogie?
No, I just want to ask that everybody, if you haven't done so, retweet the space, please, just to get it out to the family. That's all. Bless the algorithm.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. Yeah, everybody, definitely share out the space. I appreciate all my listeners who came through and listened to this conversation. Thanks to all the speakers who shared their thoughts. Thank you to A Boogie, my awesome co-host. Appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. So make sure you check in and set your reminders. Peace.